Shalom. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we have a local celebrity, we might say, someone who was a figurehead of the Jewish community in the Capital District, who was there way before I was in the Capital District only a few years ago, and that is Rabbi Alfred Fruchter of the Beth Tephilah synagogue in Troy. Is the Orthodox synagogue in Troy, and the only one there is nowadays. And like I said, Rabbi Fruchter, first of all, welcome to our show, and we're glad to have you, a distinguished member of the Jewish community, to say the least. Like I was saying, that I'm only here really about 3 years in the Capital District, and as someone as myself, or new people come in and they look at Troy, and it's really not a thriving community in that sense, and not in the Jewish community sense. But people always say, oh, Troy in the olden days, or people who were born in Troy, maybe they're living in Albany or in Delmar nowadays, they say Troy in its heyday or was even more than Albany. And for a newcomer like myself, it's hard to believe that. It's hard to understand that, to see it from what it is today. Maybe you will start off in trying to describe us the history of the Jewish community in Troy and also the history of the Beth Tephilah synagogue.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Simon. Troy indeed is a long-standing Jewish community, but it was much more flourishing and vibrant in years back, 50 to 60 years ago. Our synagogue is an old one. It was organized in 1860, and at that time was called Beth Israel Biker Cholim. And it then combined with another synagogue around the same time, which is called Chai Adam. And then it was they merged and used the same building that they both had, and that's on River Street, 82 River Street in Troy.
That's when they got the name Beth Tephilah, when they merged?
No, that comes a little later.
Right.
It was first was Beth Israel Biker Cholim. I'll come to that a little later. Then in the year of 1961. There was another synagogue around the corner from us, and also an Orthodox synagogue, very highly esteemed. And that synagogue sold its building to the Russell Sage College, which had buildings all around. And it took that one, which fit very well in with their plans. And therefore, that synagogue merged with ours. The name of that one was called Sharei Tefillah, which means gates of heaven. Beth Tephilah means house of, Sharei Tefillah means gates of prayer, and Beth Tephilah means a house of prayer. And when they merged, they changed the name using the first word of our synagogue, Beth, meaning house of, and instead of Sharei Tefillah, it was Beth Tephilah, because Sharei Tefillah was the other one. So you had the first word of our name and the second word from their name. So it was Beth Tephilah, house of prayer, combining the house of Israel, Beth Israel, and also the Sharei Tefillah house, gates of prayer. Now, when they combined, they had very outstanding rabbis even before they combined. First, there was a Rabbi Baruch Zev Mott from 1885 to 1894. He was the rabbi in the synagogue. And then afterwards, there was a Rabbi Chaim Mordechai Lasker, who was a rabbi from 1895 until his death, 1932. Then there was Rabbi Jacob S. Cohen. He was an outstanding rabbi. He was a rabbi in the synagogue from 1946 or 47 until 1969. Then he retired to Passaic, New Jersey. He was an outstanding man, learned both in rabbinical studies and in secular learning, and a man of great personality and great achievements. And he just died about a year ago. I just received from the Young Israel of Passaic, New Jersey, a whole folder of material with his picture, extolling him on the first yahrzeit, the first death anniversary of his passing, with tributes from various people who spoke at his funeral, including the rabbi of Young Israel Synagogue, and including other celebrities and other people in his family. And it was very, very impressive. And I hope you can see how beautifully he looked. Then after he left here, there was a Rabbi Bialik, 1970-72, and I succeeded him. I'm here from 73, which is now 16 years. And then, so going back to what you said, the history, in the old days, it's a very flourishing community. I was told that at one time there were 4 kosher butchers in Troy. There was all kinds of industry in Troy at that time, even generally in the general community. There was a railroad station, the train used to run through here. It was much more active than it is now. And so it was with the Jewish community, and there were people of learning, people who were observant, and people who took pride in their synagogues and in the Jewish life here. As I mentioned, they combined, it was 1969 when the Shari Tefillah sold the building and merged with us in 69. Then there was another small synagogue, this time in Cohoes, which was a suburb, and they combined with us. I have to correct myself. The Shari Tefillah combined with us in 1961, and the Cohoes synagogue, which was small, combined with us, I believe, in 69. So it was a combination of 3 synagogues, and to this day, every time we say memorial prayers for the deceased, the Yizkor, on Yom Kippur, on the Shmini Atzeret, on the last day of Passover, and on the second day of Shavuot, we make 4 different separate prayers of memorial. One for the deceased people of Beth Tephilah, which is our synagogue now, and then for Shari Tefillah, which was the previous synagogue that merged with us, then the Beth Jacob, which was another previous one, and Shari Tefillah, Beth Yaakov.
Cohoes.
Yeah, that's Cohoes. Beth Israel Bikar Cholim was the original name. So we have these memorial prayers besides the prayers for the people, the Holocaust, for the martyrs of Israel, and so forth. So we have this tradition, but you see what has happened over the many years. This community deteriorated in number of people, even since the time I'm here. Many of the outstanding people of my congregation have since deceased, and people have moved away, and so.
Probably paralleled the general population decrease of Troy. Again, I'm only here for a few years, but it seems that Troy was more industrial, and it just seems that when the economy of Troy went downhill, then it seems that the Jewish people also began to flee.
That's true. Troy as a whole, in previous years, there were boat rides from here to New York City. Before my time, long ago, there was a railroad station, and there are all kinds of industries here which are no longer with us today. And so it was with the Jewish community that people little by little got less, especially in the last number of years, last few years, we feel the dearth of our people. Yet now, something new has happened which has given us new life. You know what I'm talking about? In October 16th, this past October, we had an influx of young people because of a yeshiva which started here. It was part of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, which has headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, with Rabbi Schneerson. And so they expanded, and we acquiesced to give our synagogue to house the yeshiva. At first, there were 23 students, ages 17 to 20, with I think 4 or 5 teachers. And now, since then, we have 40 students with 8 teachers, besides Rabbi Simon and Rabbi Rubin, the local Chabad representatives, who come to teach on a regular basis, almost every day, to the same students. So it's a very enriching experience. But for us, it's like the resurrection of youth. Most of our people were now recently middle-aged and old, and now we have an influx of young people. It's like a transformation of and I remind myself what Sarah said when the angel told her husband that she would bear a son in her old age. She laughed to herself. How is this possible? She said, after I waxed old, will I have delight? Meaning, how can I give birth after so many years? She was 90, and Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born. And say, this is a fulfillment here in our time, not as a question mark, but as a matter of fact. We had old people mostly, and we had trouble even with a million many times. And here's an influx of young youth, young people, and rabbis and teachers who give us an additional strength. Every day we have a strong minyan because of their presence here. So I think it's a great development and a great thing to be thankful for, which we be thankful.
I think it is a tremendous idea that there's so many youth and people. And I think it's to the merit of Beth Tephilah also, because some people want to have their synagogues and the older people as a museum, like don't touch it. Of course, listen, 40 people come in, or you're going to have kids in there. There's a little noise, and people, I know in many synagogues that little kids never feel wanted. I don't want to mention names, and this anyway isn't in the city, but there was one synagogue in these Rosh Hashanah tickets that they had, and they said no kids allowed, no children allowed, right on the ticket. And I thought itself is absurd, but this is it, that they don't want it, they want quiet, they don't want. The trouble is, these kids are not felt that they're not wanted in the synagogue, that you wait 10, 15 years, like you say, in the next generation, and they're not going to come back. They say, you didn't want me, and they didn't feel for anything. And I think that's why I said that Beth Tephilah and its membership and its board, that they felt that they wanted the youth, and it wasn't just the beautiful building, and one time we'll have to bring our cameras just to show how beautiful a synagogue it is. Probably the most beautiful synagogue in the Capital District, and really in one of the few and old-time synagogues that you have in the entire country, probably. That they felt that it was more important to have a living edifice, the human beings, the Jewish people there, than just having just beautiful bricks or windows or whatever have you, a nice paint job. That the important part of buildings are that the people in there, there's so many buildings, people always tell me it's almost a shame that these synagogues raise, of course, these multi-million-dollar structures and tremendous mortgages, and the truth is they use it about 3 times a year. They're on the high holidays. I mean, no person makes, they don't build a civic center to use it for 2 days for a circus. They try to use it as much as they can. And it's the same thing for any building. And a synagogue that's constantly, day in, like you say, day in and day out, that's being used and is willing to accept people and understand this is where what it's all about, in simple words, that it's not just having a nice, beautiful building for once in a while a bar mitzvah, but it's every day that there's some youth and people being used, and let the people use it out. And maybe it's a little more noisy, and maybe it's a little more, it gets a little more dirty, and maybe it's more ruckus in it, and things are being used, and I'm sure things here and there get a little bit more broken or whatever. It's in any time that things are used, but that is more important. So I think that's also a merit for the congregation of Beth Tephilah. It says merited things go to merited places. I mean, it's not just that happened to fall into that. I think that the people were looking for something, that they had such a beautiful Jewish community. That's what they say. Like you say, 4 kosher butcher shops. It's amazing you can talk about the entire Jewish community that way. Now there are, of course, only 2 for the entire, not only Capital District, I'm saying, you're including Saratoga, Glens Falls, Poughkeepsie, into Massachusetts, for this whole general area. Northern New England and Western Massachusetts, you're really talking about 2 kosher butcher shops. And it's amazing, that's why I say when you hear it, that there were 4 kosher butcher shops in Troy alone, and people don't even think of Troy as any outstanding Jewish community nowadays. So it just shows, it's like a microcosm of what's happening to the Jewish community in general.
In recent years there was 1 kosher butcher in Troy, and then eventually he had to close up. So now there are 2 kosher butchers only in Albany, and anyone in surrounding communities has to go to Albany to get meat. There's 1 butcher does deliver. But then what you said before is true. Young people do make more noise. They're not so tidy as the neat older people, but it's a sign of life. I welcome the fact that the young people are here. For example, I hear them studying the Talmud with the traditional chant, as when you study Gemara, and it brought back memories of my own days when I studied in yeshiva in Chicago, the Hebrew Theological College, beside the Torah, and it brought back many beautiful memories, and I admired and felt good to hear these boys studying that way so intensively and so much interested in their work. So true, they're not so circumspect with exactly tidiness, but the life is so beautiful. It's so nice, it's so heartening to see and hear these boys studying. I'm reminded of the comment of our sages when you know the story of Isaac and Jacob and Esau. Yitzchak wanted to give his blessing before he died to his favorite son Esau, and Rebekah wanted her favorite son Yaakov to get it, and she had Esau dress up in goat's hair to let his father, who couldn't see, would feel the hands, and when he did, he said, the hands are hands of Esau, but the voice is the voice of Jacob. So the rabbi's comment, as long as the voice of Jacob, meaning the voice of Torah, the voice of prayer, is heard in the synagogues and houses of study, then the hands of a wicked Esau will not prevail against the Jewish people. So I think of this when I see these boys studying and hear the voice of Jacob as they rise in prayer and in study.
Very good. That's really the vitality of the Beth Tephilah synagogue. Let me ask you something, Rabbi Fruchter, that it's important to understand that the people in Troy, is there that maybe their children come around? Is there a kind of, maybe, I don't know, say alumni synagogue feeling? Maybe that people come around and there's certain people, they make memorials that come for Yizkor Yom Kippur to memorialize the Troy community?
Unfortunately, we do not have really young people, except a few children that come on Saturday mornings and holidays. But most people that come for Yizkor memorial services for the parents are more in middle-aged range. Some are a little younger, but for the most part, young people haven't been staying in Troy. Either they get married and go out of town, or they go into some other profession out of town, or they go to universities out of town, and very few are left in the city itself of Troy. Unless people, there are some people whose parents have businesses in Troy, and they remain here. But this influx, this was a new charge of life, young people in the synagogue. And I don't think even in the old days, 50, 60 years ago, when this was a flourishing congregation, that there were so many young people as there are now. It's almost to say, be invited, we're inviting you, come to see for yourselves. It's hard to picture without seeing for oneself.
Well, you say about coming seeing yourself, and there was a big write-up, of course, the Yeshiva in the Times Union, yes. And it's amazing, really. Of course, we're constantly working. People listen, learn Torah, see how beautiful the Torah, see how beautiful Judaism, experience a Shabbos, come for a Yontif, a Passover, a Purim, or whatever. There's always another mitzvah, has something to be done in Judaism around the calendar. But it really is amazing that the Yeshiva brings in more people, just like you say, the uniqueness of it, that the people have visited. Some people I know that we've been trying to get in, or that they've been trying to, and they promise me, yeah, I'll come once in a while, and they show up just by themselves. They say, I was just so excited to see or hear about in the paper that there's a yeshiva happening there. So it really does attract other people, and that people want to drop by. They want to know something's there. Like I said, most synagogues, what's happening? You can come in the middle of the day. There's really nothing happening. There, people are just coming. Every week I see another few people that are just interested in saying, hey, what's something happening here, something unique, like you say, that really, as much as Troy anytime was, never happened before. It's something that has been better. Really, it's better now than maybe in certain aspects than it ever has been before.
A few days after the yeshiva came here in October, it was actually October 16th, but a few days later, a man came into the synagogue. He had lived in Saratoga Springs. He had moved to New York City, to Brooklyn. And he does come in a few days every so often for business. He came in that particular day, and he saw what happened. He saw the boys. He was so enthusiastic, so impressed, so inspired, that he immediately wrote a letter expressing his happiness with seeing the yeshiva, and pledging to give a substantial amount of money to the synagogue every year because of what the synagogue has done in bringing this yeshiva into its premises. So it doesn't, and I've seen many people come who are very much impressed favorably with the kind of students we have and how they are studying so sincerely.
It's very good, very good. Well, it's good that there's vitality. Like you say, it's a living epic that Judaism really is alive, and sometimes it goes down. Maybe it's really the Holocaust, our numbers decreased, and Judaism decreases, but it seems like throughout the 3,300 years of Judaism, that always bounces back somewhere or another. Rabbi Fruchter, you have a very interesting story I'd like you to bring out in your own personal life. You said, of course, you learned in yeshiva in Chicago. It's actually my hometown also.
Well, I know that.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah, it's Chicago. There's a lot of Jewish people there. And also before, I think you had your rabbinate, you had as a first, well, I don't know exactly, but you were in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'd like you to relate the happenings
First I was
there.
in Chicago for 5 years, then I was in Memphis, Tennessee for 9 years. From 1945 to 54. And in 52, a family moved downstairs from us. Of course, we had to live within walking distance of the synagogue, so it was a few blocks away from the synagogue. It was called Beth Tephilah. And this family moved in. There was a father, a mother, and one son, and there was a grandmother. And the name of this family was Presley. And they were very poor. Sometimes my wife would help them pay their water bill, which was on our meter, and they couldn't pay even the dower that was their part, but we advanced it, and sometimes they couldn't pay back. But she didn't have a telephone, so his mother came out to use our telephone, and they didn't have a record player. One day, I was out of town that time, it was in the summer, and the son, his name was Elvis, rang the bell, and he asked my wife whether he could play a record that he made on our record player. And sure enough, he did. And I didn't hear that, I wasn't home, but my wife said all day long, his mother played the record, and the outstanding words of that record were, "That's all right, Mama." And all day my wife kept hearing it. So that's our acquaintance with him as neighbors. Sometime later, I had moved from Memphis to Oakland, California, and I saw a headline that must have been about maybe 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years later. I see a headline: Elvis Presley, the girl swoon, his concert in the auditorium. So could that be the same one we knew? And sure enough, it was. And then later on, a year or two later, he came to San Francisco, which is across the bridge from Oakland, and he had a press conference. And I was invited, I guess many other clergy were invited to meet him. When I came there, I listened to him, people asked him questions, and then I went up to him afterwards. I said, "You should remember me." He said, "Sure." He had a Jewish boy from my congregation that was a schoolmate of his, and he traveled with him. He said, "I was just talking to what wonderful neighbors you were to us." So that's the relationship. Whatever.
So you knew him. It's a special story. And there's so much the memorability that goes with all these rock and roll stars, especially a person like Elvis Presley.
Well, if he were alive, some people say he's alive now, which I don't believe. but if he were alive, I'm sure he'd recognize it.
That's very good. Well, it's an interesting, it's important that, the stories in the Talmud also, that you're friendly with people before that to become famous, and then they appreciate, you can't just be friendly with, once the person's the President of the United States, then all of a sudden everybody's your friend. Why not? Everybody wants to be friends with the President, get on his good side. It's interesting to get friends with famous personalities even before they are. It's important to be friends with anybody. But I think it's an interesting idea that his first record that he had to play on a rabbi's...
I'm not sure it was his first record, but it was one of the first anyway.
Probably before he was well known in any case.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that's... Before once he's well known already, he can buy his own record player.
And by the way, I've got where he made the record was at the store of or something had to do with the store of Lansky Brothers. This father was a member of my congregation, and they had a store on Beale Street, actually Beale Avenue, but it's called Beale Street, where all the big businesses, especially the black people, were there, and. They helped him a great deal. I don't remember the particulars, but I saw it written up.
Delansky's, you're saying,
Delansky,
to help them, not...
To help, I think, with materials or whatever it was, or getting equipment or making contacts with him, for him.
Just get him whirling over here in the business. Well, you remember him as a good person? What kind of character, Elvis, when he was...
He was a nice boy. When we knew him, he was a very nice boy. And how he deteriorated later, I think it was because of drugs. But as far as we know, he was a very fine, polite young man. I know when he was graduating from high school, my wife bought him a little gift of tie clip and cufflinks, and he kissed her. He said he never had that before. They were really poor at the beginning, and then God helped him. He rose to high fame and the high money.
I see a lot of those kind of people that even though that high fame, that their end is, we can Yiddish, a finsterer sof, dark end, so to speak. It's a shame that they, I don't know what it is. Our television show isn't is at the highest heights like those people in Hollywood, but those tremendous fame it seems like it corrupts people. I don't know what happens over there. It seems like good people, and they go in there and they can sing or they can dance, and I don't know what it is. It'd be an interesting idea. Here you see a person that was such a good-hearted and sweet person that had such troubles that you wouldn't wish on anybody.
Well, probably wealth and power often corrupt a person. We have in the Torah too, in the song of Moses before he died, the song of Hazino, it says, "Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivot." Israel waxed fat and kicked, meaning sometimes the great wealth and power can demean a person and deteriorate in his character. And I hope it didn't happen to Elvis, but maybe it was a result of drugs and stupor of power and wealth.
Well, it's interesting how Reverend Troy met up with the most famous rock and roll star. It's always a cute story. I think that's always an interesting thing to relate.
He wasn't that famous when we knew him.
Yeah, well, that even makes it a better story. I mean,
later on.
Here he is. He had his starts with his neighbor, with the rabbi over here in Memphis, Tennessee. That makes it even a better idea. Thank you, Rabbi Fruchter, for coming in and talking over a little bit about Troy. Like I say, for people who move in, like myself, it's a new experience. You always hear maybe people talk about, Troy once upon a time, or like maybe older people, I was bar mitzvahed, or I was married in Troy, and they're not there anymore. And people talk about this site, Troy, and you look around, and people don't know what is Troy. It's a little bit of an insight that it really was something very special in its own time, and if it's getting back to its old form nowadays.
And I meant to say that, as you mentioned before, our synagogue is very beautiful, has unique construction. I think it's the only one synagogue in the capital district which has a separate platform for reading the Torah. It wasn't so at the beginning, but in recent years, one of the men who chanted the services on the holiday said he wouldn't chant unless he made a special platform from which the Torah would be read. But it exudes a very kind of warm atmosphere when you come in and you see it. I think you'll agree with that.
Very, very much so. I think that's a very unique synagogue for the Capital District, and like I said, and I've seen very few even throughout the United States that look that way, and I think it's very special that keep these things alive, and not, like I say, not as a museum piece, and that's not what Judaism is for, but that it should be used and people should come in, and like you say, nowadays it has that bracha, that blessing also. That's such a beautiful building, has such beautiful people to fill it in with. I thank you, Rabbi Fruchter, for joining us, and hopefully we'll meet again. Maybe we'll show some close-up pictures of the Beth Tephilah synagogue one day.
I hope so. Is there time for you?